If you're a DIYer and you're getting ready to take on a project that feels like it's too much, here are some ideas that might help you meet or exceed what in your mind would be the product if you hired a pro, without spending a ton of money on a bunch of tools and without having decades of experience in the bank. So most of what I'm going to bring to the table right now are in the broad general categories of how do you plan and how much do you plan? How do I establish a budget? How much do I order? When is enough enough? When should I think about hiring a subcontractor? And when, doggone it, do I just have to put on my big boy shorts and dive in? We may not answer every question you've got, but I think we're going to help you with a few. The first thing to talk about is your plan. And when I say plan, what I really mean is your design. What do you have in mind? It's important to resist the impulse to build something that nobody's ever seen before. There's a reason nobody's ever seen it before. And part of the reason is the people that tried it before were utterly disappointed. Maybe. There's also a difference between art and craft, and art and practicality. And maybe you are an artistic person and you want your project to reflect that. Well, be careful. Don't make the art piece central to your design. The things that are central to design need to revolve around practicality, expense, how long to build, and how long it's going to last, not how utterly unique is it. So if you're still in the planning stage, you have complete control over the outcome and really a big control over the process. So don't be in a hurry to be through with your planning and start your purchasing. The other thing is, where is it in Proverbs? In a multitude of counselors there is safety. Seldom is this more true than when you're planning a construction project. Talk to everyone you can. Whatever your plan is, whether it's on the back of a napkin or on a piece of vellum or on a CAD computer screen, show as many people as you think know anything what it is that you're planning to do, and then listen carefully to their reactions. Now, the reason you have to listen carefully is if they love you, they are caught between not wanting to see you do something dumb and not wanting to hurt your feelings. So encourage them to really say what they think. And you don't have to take every word they speak as being the gospel truth, but if you're smart, you're going to consider every word they say. You know, maybe the most important aspect of planning is planning where your dollars are going to come from. There's nothing sadder than seeing somebody start and then run out of money. And whether or not they run out of money is usually a function of whether or not they have their loan secured. You can get into real trouble by breaking ground, going as far as you can with your cash, and then going to a bank or a lender and saying, "Mr. Lender, would you lend me the money to take this project across the finish line?" He will say, "No, I will not, because I don't know what mechanics liens may be lurking in your project because you started and didn't pay somebody." So as soon as you break ground on a lot, you have contaminated your ability often to get a construction loan, because the banker, the loaner, the individual coming to you with the money would not be in the first position if they have to make a claim against the property that the work's being done on. So be very careful about starting with cash, figuring to jump in with a loan without securing the loan first. So another vital aspect of planning is not just putting the house together, but staging the material, having room to operate. It was the biggest challenge with the spec house. We built a house when we started the channel. We got 150 videos out of it. It was a big project, and it was hard because the lot was small and it was steep, and so staging was really a challenge. Fortunately, we could use the adjacent lot. It wasn't built out, and the owner was so agreeable. But when you're planning your project, you have to be realistic about where will trucks unload, where will I store the material safely, are my neighbors going to object, is theft going to be a problem? All of the questions around getting the material to the job. Now, the next part of this is once you begin to order, or at least do your material takeoffs, count the boards, count the square footage of roofing, which is pretty tricky. You have to, especially, let's just talk lumber. You have to account for some amount of waste. 15% is not unreasonable. Over-ordering lumber is not a mistake, it's insurance. Because the last thing you want to do is order exactly what you need and then find out you don't have exactly what you need, and at a critical juncture, you have to stop what you're doing and go back to the lumber yard and get 3 or 4 or 10 or 40 more boards. Order heavy. Waste is going to be a real cost. Efficiency in the time you have has to be accounted for, and a good lumber yard will let you bring boards back for full credit if they are in exactly the same shape they were when you received them. So a couple more things about materials, lumber on the job specifically, and then we'll jump into budgeting, ways that, contractors tend to think about the money they need to do the job. But first, the staging aspect includes, how are you going to store this material safely? Number one, it needs to be off of the ground. So there needs to be something there that you can use as stickers, so that if a forklift delivers, the forklift can set it down. So that if you are unloading it off your own trailer, you can stack it up out of the mud, away from the bugs, and then cover it. Lumber is photoreactive. That is, when light shines on it, the moisture leaves as a function of the heat, and the board twists and shrinks and it goes wild, especially pressure-treated lumber. If you watch the way contractors handle their pressure-treated lumber, when it gets to the job, it is fastened down or carefully covered. And even if you don't have a tarp, plywood makes a very good cover over a pile of 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x12s. And you say, well, I don't want my plywood exposed to the weather. Your plywood is not going to degrade in the sun as quickly as the boards will. Now, obviously, lumber is not the only thing you're storing. Perhaps as you're getting ready to do some X, Y, or Z component of your project, C, D, E, or F comes on sale. There's a store, there's a window store, there's a clearance on doors, or you order your doors too early and you have to receive them. You ought to have some sort of an idea where you can have some enclosed and very safe storage. So if you get a chance to save money on interior finish items, like real money, you can secure them and stage, store, keep them safe and undamaged until you install them. Now, I don't know if that's your grandmother's garage or your uncle's shop or a storage unit that you have to rent, but you got to have some place really safe to store the high-value items when you have to take delivery earlier than you want. Now, there's another thing about storing lumber. You're still storing the lumber after the house is framed, because all the other processes are happening on the inside. The mechanical systems are being installed, the exterior is being installed, the windows are being installed, that all of the weeks and months that go by while the house is turned into a house and not just a shell, that lumber can degrade. So before you cover it up with drywall, you need to check out the video that we did about the pickup work, framing pickup work, which includes largely straightening studs and joists and the diaphragms that you've created that have to receive the sheetrock, so that when the sheetrock goes on, it's straight. Because here's a spoiler alert. Boards will move even if they're nailed in. You crown your studs first so the crowns are all facing the same direction when you raise the wall, but before you cover it up, you need to take a straight edge and make sure they have stayed straight enough to look good. So let's talk about money. How contractors approach the budget that they have for what they're building. Now, different contractors have different models, and so the time and material guys they're constrained by whatever they told you was the estimate, but they're not as constrained as they might be if it was a hard bid job. But if it's a hard bid job, and keep this in mind, if you decide to subcontract and they give you a hard number, you have to understand that if they are smart, they included in that hard number every possibility for catastrophic failure that they could realistically look forward to happening. And you're going to pay for that, whether the failure happens or not. And so you have to think about that as if you are the contractor, even though it's DIY. Because when you run up to a moment where you realize, wow, there's a tool I have to rent that I didn't know that I had to rent, and then you go down to the rental yard and you find out what that thing costs per day, per week, or per month, all of a sudden your budget has strain. So one of the things you're talking to the people about before you ever break ground is, what equipment am I going to need? And then you're thinking, where am I going to gain access to that equipment, especially heavy equipment? And if you're saying, well, I'll just go down and rent a skid steer. Okay, but a skid steer is probably going to cost you, I'm going to make this number up and say $600 a week. I mean, maybe more than that. It doesn't take many weeks of that until, man, you got to talk about just exactly what kind of kitchen cabinets you can afford. Because the expenditures on the front end have got to be accounted for someplace. So find a way to get a realistic assessment of what specialty equipment or specialty tools you're just going to have to do whatever it is that you're getting ready to do. One more thing about renting that skid steer. You've watched guys riding wheelies around big construction sites on skid steers, and man, it looks like the best ride at the fair. Imagine how much work you could get done. If this is the first time you've ever sat down in the seat of a Bobcat, you're going to get nothing done for about an hour before it starts to come together. And at the end of the week, you will have only gotten 50% done of what a real operator would have done since he already put in his 10,000 hours. And to that, one of the reasons contractors go broke, and this is essentially what you have to think of because you are acting as a contractor even though you're not paying yourself, is because they underbid work. That means they are overly optimistic on how long it will take and how beautiful it's going to be, but mostly how long it's going to take. Because you're going to get real close on estimating your material. And the amount of time it's going to take to install it is anybody's guess. And so until a contractor learns that everything's going to take twice as long as he thinks, he's going to lose money. And if you don't figure that out ahead of time, it's going to strain your marriage. Because if you're living in a camp trailer and you've been promising her now for 3 years that you were going to get this house done, and then 3 years into the project, you're still 3 years from done, there's no happy in camp, okay? So think immediately about the fact that everything is going to take you twice as long as you think. Okay, so tools. Here's something that is one of my real Achilles heels. And that is, anytime I buy a tool, I feel like I'm making progress. I feel like I'm moving the job forward because I bought a tool. That is nonsense. It's only what the tool produces that is progress, no matter how good it feels to buy the tool. So before you start this, you need to decide where you are, where do you come down on the continuum between borrow, rent, and buy? If money's a problem, and it almost always is, then you're pretty well stuck with either, borrow or rent. If you rent, money's gone. If you borrow and you break it or it's stolen, the money is gone and you have more money. More money is gone and you have not only nothing to show for it, but you've got a strained relationship, probably. A very good friend of mine, and he's still a good friend of mine. But it was a tough moment for both of us. I loaned him my laser. He was building a house. He set the laser up on a tripod, and the legs on a tripod they're not tied together usually, at least on lasers, dumpy levels, that sort of thing. And he set it up on a piece of concrete, pretty smooth concrete. Well, one of those legs shot out, and so the laser went down and it blew up. That's a dead laser. He felt bad. I felt bad. Everybody felt bad. It took him a little while before he was in a position to buy a brand new laser for me. So borrowing is okay if you don't believe what Shakespeare said about neither a borrower nor a lender. B, renting. Yes, in general, it's almost always cheaper to rent than anything else you can do. But the exception to that is Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Sometimes you can buy a darn good tool for a reasonable amount of money, and then 6 months or a year later, put it back on Facebook Marketplace and sell it for exactly what you paid for it. That is true for a $100 Sawzall or a $20,000 telehandler. That's what we did on the spec house. We found on Craigslist Marketplace a telehandler for, I don't know, actually it was $27,000, and we used it for 2 years and sold it for $27,000. So in general, I'm a fan of buying used tools and equipment. Every once in a while you're going to get burned, but most of the time you're going to be in good shape. So the question is, Scott, how do I decide where to hold back on the money and where to pour the money on? How do I decide that? Well, there are all the considerations about how much value you put on appearance right now, how much value you put on zero maintenance right now. But maybe the emergency brake on the impulse to get just the nicest thing you can possibly buy is, What is it going to be that if you held back is going to reduce the resale value? 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line, the people that buy the thing you're building are going to want to facelift it anyway. It's got to be freshened up. Trends have changed, and so they're going to anticipate spending some money to make it suit their taste. You don't want them to write you an offer that is greatly reduced because there's a structural problem, because drainage is bad, or, fill in the blank. So measure how much you spend on the quality today against, will this compromise or enhance the value of this property 20 years from now? And you can always upgrade to suit your changing tastes or opportunity for a more luxury environment a year or 2 years or 5 years down the road. So the last thing as far as dollars, no, not quite the last thing. Perhaps I should have mentioned this earlier. The thing you have to realize is that in your interaction with subcontractors and other tradesmen, the money you've promised to pay them is the only strength you have in the relationship. They are working for the money. And so you are very careful about how soon you dole the money out. Now, you're also careful not to be slow pay, because that'll burn your relationship and nobody's coming back if you're slow pay. But you are so guarded about paying for anything in advance. Now, sometimes you have to pay something in advance when somebody is ordering, kitchen cabinets. Once they've ordered it, they're on the hook. So they have to have the deposit from you because it's your cabinets that are being, right, you get that? But in general, you almost never give anybody any money if they haven't provided you some sort of commensurate good or service. Now, the corollary to that is the back end, the final payment, which is not made until the work is well and truly done, with some exceptions. There are people who just come and provide a service who are not bringing any material, but you have to have them. I'm thinking, you're in a house and there's a lot of moss on the roof and you don't want to get up there and clean it off, and you come across some athletic young man who will jump up there and carefully wash that moss off the roof, or clean your gutters, or put up your Christmas lights, or whatever it is. Little niche service providers, tip that guy. If he exceeds your expectations and he tells you the bill's $300, overcome your Scrooge tendency and pay him $350. And you know what? Next year when you need him, he will jump ahead of 2 or 3 other customers that have reached out to him to provide the service for the person who has bought his interest. So the right tip at the right time is going to save you heartache in your very own future. Don't discount that. All right, so winding this up, the big problem, of course, for DIY is that it's daunting. I get a lot of comments from people that, man, I was going to build this and I was afraid, and then I watched your Spec House series and then we dove in and it worked out great. And the fact is, if you can think and if you can work and if you can talk to people, you're going to have some success, but you have to be careful. But to come up with the confidence, there's a guy in the Essential Craftsman Academy. His name is Evan Edstrom. We have a shop talk meeting twice a month, and a whole bunch of us get together with problems and solutions and ideas and pictures. That guy blows us away all the time because he's been a software guy, right? He has a geek kind of career, employment picture. But his grandpa was a machinist, and he hung out with grandpa. And so he had an idea, and he has done amazing things, both in drafting, in layout, in demolition, in siding innovations, in gathering the information for what he wants, in getting other people's input for, is this a good idea, is this a bad idea, mechanical systems, cutting edge sustainability and building efficiency. He does all the research you need to do, and then you know what? He gets up on the ladder and he sets up the scaffold and he rents or he buys the paint sprayer and he does it. And his products look good, and yours can too. Evan never gets in a hurry. He's never rushed. Everything is deliberate. That's the thing about Evan. He's smart, he's deliberate, and he doesn't scare easy. So if you feel like you have some of those characteristics, if you're smart-ish, if you're deliberate, or at least you can resist the compulsion to jump, if you can track down the advice from the people who have a reason to know, and then sift through the good advice and the bad advice. You can do this. But I want to close this with a friend of mine, Bob Hovenden. I've mentioned him on this channel before. He gave me a beautiful broadaxe after he was dead, through his wife, Merlene. They made a trip to Europe, and they went to Florence, Italy. And there's a building over there, Brunelleschi's Dome, built in the 1400s, late 1400s. And it was not he brought me this little drafting gizmo. I don't even know what this is, but it was for sale at Brunelleschi's Dome. It was something that he may have used. Somebody tell me what this is. But the dome is not the first example of structural steel or iron to provide tensile strength in stone, but it sort of set the stage and made it more commonplace for people to work in iron to hold stone in its place. The quote was, and Brunelleschi was speaking to what plagues us today, and that is geotech, the earth, the slides, the mud, the soil type, the underground springs, the rock. His quote was, when you open the earth to undertake to build, may God be with you. And it's true. When we dig, when we anticipate drainage, when we start counting 2x4s, when we order the rebar, when we stage the material, when we make the agreements, when we do the rough work and we don't fall off a ladder, and we work our way down to the end of a project and our lender is still happy, and our wife is just so pleased because her Pinterest dreams are coming to life in front of her eyes, be careful. Be careful in every way you can be careful. And be confident and be smart and full speed ahead. And every day, take the satisfaction that comes with building something that's going to last, and that you can look back and say, yep, I built that. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.